Imagine stepping onto the court with a clear game plan, not just for winning, but for making each shot count. How can the art of shot selection transform not just a player's performance, but their entire approach to the game? All right, welcome in everybody. Thank you guys so much for joining us this week. We're excited to be here. Augie and I today are going to be talking about the art of shot selection, what that looks like, what that means, how our personal philosophies are around that, and just kind of getting into depth on what it means to take a good shot in basketball. But before we get started today, we just want to briefly mention, I'm sure a lot of you have heard already, that Dikembe Mutombo recently passed away. At the time of our recording, this has actually just happened today. And we just want to, maybe mention that Dikembe Mutombo was not only such a great basketball player, and for me personally, someone that I admired, not only for his defensive presence on the court, but also for all the humanitarian things he did for his home country, and just as a great ambassador for the game of basketball. And to lose someone, at the age of 58 to brain cancer, which is a fairly young age for such a great player and just person in the basketball world, we want to make sure that we acknowledge that and him. So with that being said, I know that's obviously a little bit of a heavier way to start this episode, but we just wanted to make sure we acknowledge that today. So Dikembe Mutombo, I loved watching you as a player, and sad to hear that you had passed away at the age of 58. I don't know if you have anything you want to say, or if you watched Mutombo at all when you were growing up.
Yeah, I did, and I just wanted to say that he was a great person because everyone loved him, and that's kind of the meter that you can use. Is if he's a likable guy and everybody likes somebody, then they're normally a great person. So condolences to the family, and I'm excited to talk a little bit about shot selection.
All right, so let's transition into that shot selection. Let's start here with kind of breaking down, like, what does that mean? So in your words, when you're talking about the definition, I guess, of shot selection, and the importance of it, how would you describe that?
Getting the shots that you want. And I think the hard part with it is that as a coach in the game of basketball, you can call a play, you can run an offense, but it's really up to the players to make the final decision on what shot you're taking on that possession. So to define it, I would just say it's you trying to get the highest percentage shot each possession.
Okay. And how would you say shot selection ranks in importance? And like, if you took all the best and most important things on a basketball court, how high is shot selection on that list?
To me, the number one most important thing. So it is a big thing, and I've heard a lot of coaches talk about it before, saying that normally if you were to kind of just compare team A to team B, whoever gets the most good shots is normally going to win the game. I don't know how true that is or whatever. I've heard people say that, and I would agree. I would agree that there's been times in my career where I've been like, how did we lose that game? We won on the boards. We turned them over. We took care of the ball, but it just came down to the EFG, the effective field goal percentage, and meaning they got better shots than we did.
I think, like you said, the types of shots you take are such a big indicator on the final score. And it's something that I think coaches are constantly wrestling with, is how do we get our players to take the right shots? How do you really build into a player's philosophy, their own personal philosophy, that like, I'm going to maybe pass up a shot that's pretty good and give it to a teammate to get a perfect shot, or an excellent shot, however you want to phrase that. So I guess let's kind of dive into maybe your own personal philosophy of shot selection, what you're looking for, what you kind of teach your players on how to get a great shot to make you guys the most successful on the court.
Yeah, sure. So the first thing we're always looking for is wide open layups, and we're looking to get those normally in transition. So we have a rim runner. So as soon as we get a rebound or a steal, or we get scored on, it doesn't matter. As soon as we get a possession, we're looking to see how we can get a wide open layup in transition. We call it our primary fast break. There's not much to it. It's just a typical fast break, but that's what we're looking for first. We call those nines, and this is a kind of a thing we stole from Point Guard College, PGC, which I have a modified version. Mine's not identical to what they do, but we use that number system where nines are wide open layups. We call eights a wide open three-pointer by one of our best shooters, or a layup in the paint off 2 feet after a shot fake. So that's our 8. That's the second shot we're looking for. And then a 7 is a wide open jumper in range by anyone on our team. And then 6 is basically a contested layup off 1 foot. And then it kind of goes down from there. 5 would be like a contested jumper. And so we're looking for 7, 8s, and 9s. We're looking for wide open layups first, back doors, pick and roll. When you hit a roller, you can get a wide open layup. And we always talk about like different ways in half court how we can get a wide open layup, because you can get them, like I said, off a back door or a pick and roll, or a nice curl. And then eights is the layup off 2 feet after a shot fake, or a wide open 3-pointer by one of our best 3-point shooters. And then sevens is a wide open shot by any player in range. So those are the shots that we're looking for.
Okay, and just to kind of clarify here, is there no 10 on that scale? Is 9
there's no
the
10.
highest?
Yeah, there's no 10. And I think the reason for that at PGC is even a wide open layup you miss sometimes. So I guess that's why there's only a 9. But yeah, so no 10.
When you are teaching like these concepts, you kind of talked already about the different types of shots, like whether they're open or they're contested or layups, and obviously the percentage, that makes sense. Like what you're talking about, I think for anyone listening in, they would be like, okay, that makes sense. I understand kind of the levels that you go through, right, as you get better looks. Does any of that change though when it comes to the time on the clock, whether it's in a shot clock or the time on the clock at the end of a game or, end of a quarter, whatever it is there a situational change to any of those numbers or any of those systems as far as how they integrate into time-based, events on the court?
Yeah, I guess like if we're up with 3 minutes left, like that would change. Like we're trying to use clock and at that point, but pretty much no throughout the rest of the game. Like we'll take a wide open 3 with, 2 seconds down off the shot clock, with, I guess, 30 seconds on the shot clock. We'll take a wide open 3 by one of our best shooters. And even a wide open jumper by any of our players in range. And the reason I kind of like that scale is because, well, first of all, analytically. So the best shot you can get in basketball is a wide open layup. Analytically, that's a very high percentage shot. The second best shot that you can get is actually free throws. So that's why we say a 2-footed layup after a shot fake, because I feel like that'll get us to the line. And that's where it differs with PGC and some of these other ones that kind of have the same system. Is they basically call it like 9s and 7s, and then I don't know what they would call 8s. They don't really talk about 8s. I think 8s are free throws is what they're referring to. So we just say a layup off 2 feet after a shot fake. I feel like that'll get us to the free throw line. And at the same time, a wide open 3 by one of our best shooters. Like I think at the varsity level, like our shooters are good enough to where like that's easily a 40% shot. If it's wide open, like it's going to be 40% or better. Yeah, I forgot what the question was right there.
It's all right. Yeah, I mean, we were just talking about like situational awareness. Oh, so you kind of answered that, right?
Yeah.
So at the end of shot clock, so the philosophy stays the same. It's just it may look different. Like you may pass up a 9 if there's you're up by 6 with 3 minutes left. You may pass up a 9 if there's still like 28 seconds left on the shot clock.
Yeah, maybe not a 9. Maybe not a 9 because that's a wide open layup, right? But
okay. Oh, that's true. Okay. So maybe like a 7 or an 8.
Yeah, 7 or an 8. Yeah, for sure. We'd pass open. It's still kind of hard to pass open a wide open 3 by one of your best shooters. But probably we might. We might like if we got that shot in transition, right? With like in 5 seconds we had a wide open 3 by one of our best shooters, and we're up by 6 with 2 minutes left. Yeah, we probably should pass that up. What do you think? What do you think about that? Because if you miss that, you're giving the ball right back to them.
Right. I think it depends. I mean, I think that's one of those, that's a classic, like, no. And then it goes in, you're like, oh, yes. It's one of those perfect situations. That is such a unique time period. Like, I think 3 minutes plus, you probably take it because there's so much time left in the game. There's a lot of possessions left. Now you start getting 2 minutes and under. Now you're talking 4 possessions in the game potentially, right? And so you burn a 30 seconds off of it, and now you're at a minute 30. So like that's a really tough call there. I think it kind of depends on the personnel, right? Like if that player is in rhythm and they're hot and they're knocking down shots, like you're probably going to let them take that shot. If you're up 6 with 2 minutes left, but you were just up 12 like a minute and a half ago, you're probably like, don't take that shot, right? Because you already can feel the momentum like going the other way, and so I think as a coach sometimes you're probably like, it depends on where the momentum's going. If we're hot and we're breaking away, you may want to let them pull away. I know even if someone's coming back, you could easily hit that 3 and that would break the rhythm and the game could be over. I mean, that also happens. But that's that gamble scenario where do you go with it?
Yeah, I don't think there's really a right answer on that either, because you can't predict if that shot's going to go in or not, even if it is your best shooter, right? So I think that's just what's your preference as a coach? Like in football, are you going to like go for 2 for the win, if you're down 1 with no time left, or are you going to kick the extra point? It's like there's really no right answer. But for me personally, I'm more conservative on that stuff. Like I would want us to bring it out. I would want us to bring it out and burn the clock and then shoot a three. And if we were to miss that one, give us a chance to offensive rebound and then, run another 30 seconds. So I'm more conservative on that side. Like, I'm the kind of coach that, like, I'm scared to do kind of crazy things. Like when you're up by three, a lot of coaches will foul so they can only shoot free throws. But I worry like about fouling, put him on the free throw line, they make the first one, miss the second one, get an offensive rebound, hit a three, now you lose, right? I'd be more conservative, like, okay, if they hit the three, we'll go to overtime. So I guess in that situation, I want us to bring the ball out, personally.
It would be interesting to see, and maybe this has been done and I just don't know about it, but like if anyone's ever looked at the analytics of like that situation and compared it, like what is the percentage of the time where you take that three and you win compared to you take that three and it ends up being, the opposite effect? How does that affect the game in that situation? So I'm sure somebody out there has probably run the numbers on that and we just don't know about it, or maybe I just don't know about it, but that would be interesting to look at.
Yeah, if you think about it, it's one of your best three-point shooters. They're a 40% shooter. So if they have that shot, I guess, all things being equal, you could say it's got a 40% chance of going in. So that's not a great chance, right? It is a good chance for a three-point shooter, but in that time with that score, I would say that the odds are against you making that shot. So where if you do miss it, you're giving that other team a chance to hang around and they could come down and hit a three. Now it's a one possession game with, a minute 50 left. And so I don't know. For me, like I said, it's sketchy to me.
Yeah, no, I get it. And I probably lean a little bit more towards your side as well. But I don't know. Sometimes I feel like I'm one of those coaches that can go back and forth on it. I'm not hard line one way or the other. And I think that kind of, we talked about your philosophy on shot selection. Like my shot selection philosophy is, I think it's similar, but like I don't have it broken down as much as you do, in the sense that I don't give my players like numbers of like, here's this. Now I tell them we want an open shot every time. That's one thing I tell my kids. I say, look, first, like I'm very much okay with all of my players taking an open shot. I don't believe in telling kids like you're not allowed to shoot. Now, I will obviously talk to a kid that, like, if you don't have a three-point shot, like, don't take three-pointers, Like, last year, my post player, she couldn't shoot three-pointers, so she stayed mid-range and in. But as far as when she caught and she was open, like, I was fine with her taking a mid-range, even though, really, her strongest moves are right around the basket. Because I feel like a lot of times what happens is when coaches get too hard on the shot selection side and they start being too nitpicky about being like, well, you're not a shooter, or you're not this. One, you're stunting the kids' growth, which I still think in high school, like, part of our job is to develop kids, right? And I know for most kids, that's the end of the road, so you're also trying to win games. It's not just purely development, like at youth level, like real young. But still, like, you're trying to develop them. And two, I think it can be detrimental to a player who's, like, maybe on the cusp. Like, they're not a great shooter, but they're decent enough. And if they just take like one or two threes a game, they might knock down 1 out of 2, and then it'll keep the defense honest. And maybe they're a great penetrator, but if they can just hit 1 or 2 a game, that opens, or like not even hit, just shoot 1 or 2 a game, it opens up the rest of their game, because then the team has to play them honestly on defense. And you already know when you come out and you got some guard who can't shoot at all, you're like, oh, we're playing you straight Rondo defense. Like, we're sitting 10 feet off you, packing the paint, and it can just disrupt the whole team, because now they basically have a help defender like all the time. So I think that I err more on the side of giving kids freedom, but within reason, and also like making them understand, like, hey, like, if this is out of your range, don't take the shot if you really can't shoot it. And I think most kids are aware of that. I think it's when you start putting the clamps on them, like, don't shoot at all, that they start getting really questionable in their decision making. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, no, totally. That's why our sevens, we take sevens all day, and that's wide open shot from anybody in range. And so that just like opens the doors for anybody, as long as, like you said, in range. That's good, because when we explain it like that and the kids are like passing those shots up, because they do, right? Like, non-shooters will pass up wide open shots sometimes, and you're like, dude, like, we just worked so hard to get that shot, to get a 7. We finally got it. Wait, great, we got a 7. And then they just pass it up, and then they start to realize, like, okay, like, you might as well, even if you're not a great shooter, you might as well shoot it, because passing those shots up like kills your opportunity to offensive rebound too, right? You, like, everyone's like, oh yeah, there's the wide open shot where everyone's getting ready to offensive rebound, and then you just pass it up, and it's like, dude, you're not going to get a good shot that possession if that happens normally, So yeah.
And sometimes that might be the only open shot you were going to get, and
yeah.
And that's it. I guess another question, kind of following up to you talking about, like, your best shooters are, your 8s, if they're wide open. Do you actually tell your shooters, like, who are your 8s? Like, do you tell your players who these are our best shooters? They're, this is where they're at compared to the others. Are you pretty upfront with them about that?
Not always, but I make it pretty clear. Like, I'll name drop every now and then, like, hey, we're looking to get him a shot. And like, a lot of times too, I'll tell our team like who our primary scorer is, because to me it's all about clarity. Like you need clarity, like the players want clarity. And so like saying like, okay, hey, this is our primary scorer when it comes time to like run an out of bounds play, like there's always that option A, and like people are scrambling to find a spot, like, well, where your primary scorer is going to go. And so you can run stuff to them a lot easier, and everyone kind of like knows to set them up and stuff like that. But I'm not like some coaches will do like green light shooting, right? Where they do like a bunch of shooting competitions and shooting tests. And then they will literally be like, okay, this is our best shooter. This is, like we've planned on doing that a couple years in a row, but I just haven't pulled the trigger on that. So because I just don't know how valid that is. Like it has to be in the game. You know what I mean? Like you could do shooting drills, but like that doesn't necessarily mean that's going to get you your best shooters in the game, because people are different. And that kind of brings me to another thing I was thinking about is like not all shots are created equal too. Like I'll take a drive and kick three over like sprinting off a screen, popping out, having to do like fade footwork, get your feet squared up and shoot it. Like those aren't the same shot selections. Like I'd rather have like my third best 3-point shooter shoot a wide open drive and kick than somebody have to sprint, my best shooter have to sprint off a screen, get his feet set and shoot it. So yeah, those kind of things matter too, I think, in shot selection.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think what you talked about with the shooting drills is definitely valid because, shooting in a gym with nobody contesting your shot, or at least even if it's dummy defense, nobody really contesting your shot, like that is so different than in a game where you got to make a split second decision, and you got people running and you're tired because you've been just defending all game or whatever you've been doing. That can look extremely different. And how it is, sometimes the lights go on and some people just aren't really meant for that, right? Like some people just cannot handle that when the lights go on and the game's actually being played. So there's so many things that tie into that. And sometimes the other thing too is you might have a kid at the beginning of the season who's like an all right shooter, and then by the end of the season they're shooting it pretty well. And you don't want to pigeonhole them into one spot and say like, well, you can't do this or you can't do that, because they might be your fifth best shooter, and by the end of the season they're like your third best shooter, or your second best shooter, and you want them to get some shots. So that's something else that I've seen happen before. So when you guys are kind of teaching this and teaching your players about good shot selection, are there any like drills that you use? Is there anything specifically you do in practice to try and gear them up for the decision-making aspect of here's what you do in this situation, here's what to react here? Or is it more as they play and when you're in practice just correcting them and saying like, hey, that's a 5, we don't want that shot, or that's an 8, that's the shot we want?
A little bit, yeah. So we talk about like neutral, small advantage, big advantage. So like when we're playing like half court offense, defense is set, like we tell them we're neutral. So we're working to get an advantage, whether somebody's running off a screen, it's a pick and roll, whatever kind of action is happening in our offense is to get a small advantage. So as soon as we get a small advantage, now we want to keep that advantage. A lot of people call it dominoes, like it's like dominoes falling, right? So as soon as we have a small advantage, we try to keep that advantage. And if you keep it long enough, eventually you'll get a big advantage, and we want to take those big advantage shots. So we will communicate like, hey, that's a small advantage 3, because like there's a difference between being open and being wide open. And so we're really working for wide open, which happens when you have the defense in rotation, right? As soon as you can get that advantage, put the defense in rotation where they have to help keep the advantage. If you keep it long enough, that rotation will end, right? And there'll be one person normally doesn't have their cover. So then you get a wide open 3, or a big advantage could be like a long closeout. So there's a difference between like a short closeout and a long closeout. Like I could beat a long closeout as a good shooter, at least. I could beat a long closeout every time to the basket for a 9, or for, another forced rotation, then one more pass for a big advantage. So yeah, it's all about the difference between being open and then being wide open, because it's pretty easy to get open. Like I could like run off any screen, like as a player myself, I could run off any screen and get open for a shot, but it's not wide open and it's not going to give me a good chance of making it. But if others are creating for others, then we can get a wide open one. So basically just telling them, that's a small advantage shot, that's a big advantage shot.
I was actually thinking of this as we were talking. Once a player, like let's say they're getting going, right? They've knocked down a couple shots, they're feeling themselves, they got that rhythm, right? They're in the flow. How are you about, how do you feel about the heat check, right? Like they come down, they've just hit 2 or 3 threes in a row, and then they all of a sudden, they hezzy pull and they barely miss. It's not like terrible or anything, but they miss. And it's like, well, that really wasn't a great shot, but you just knocked like 2 or 3 in a row. Like, how do you feel about that? Is that like, no, we don't really do the heat check, like just get the best shot? Or is it like, okay, every once in a while, we understand, if you're feeling yourself, we're going to let you have a little bit of leash on that.
If I was to be completely honest, like, I'm not super excited if somebody comes down and pulls a heat check, because like, that's not team basketball fully, in my opinion. But I don't really care. I understand it 100%. As a player, like, I understand it. Like, I would pull a heat check as a player myself. But yeah, as a coach, like, imagine you're in the, state championship game, right? You're playing a team that is ranked way higher than you, and you got the lead by 2 points. You're in the third quarter. It's not fourth quarter. Let's just kind of be conservative here. And one of your guys has been having a great game. It's the reason you're up right now. You're about to upset this team. And then your guy comes down and just pulls a heat check, and just clanks it. It's like, well, in that time and place, like, I'm not excited at all about the heat check, because every possession matters, right? If we're up by 20, or it's like, just some random exhibition game like that, to me, that's different. But like, in those big games, and you've played in those games, like, every possession, you're just like, every possession matters so much. Like, it's so important. So in that situation, and just to be overall blanket of everything, I would say, like, yeah, I'm not too excited about heat checks.
Sure. And I get that. And I think probably lean towards like, hey, let's get the best shot no matter what. Because in my head, I'm like, okay, you just knocked 2 or 3 down. Now, if you make the right pass a few times, they may actually forget about you, and then you'll get it back and you'll get an easy one. You'll probably knock that 4th one down, right? And so I think as a coach, for sure, we all understand that. But I also know both of us as players have been there where it's like, all right, just give me the ball and let me just get this shot up, because I'm feeling it. And if I hit that 4th shot, like, oh, now it's going crazy. Now we're really getting hot. So yeah, I can definitely see a little bit of both sides there. But I think all coaches probably I would assume might lean a little bit more towards, hey, let's get the best shot still,
Yeah, and I would also add too that, like, if you have a player that's like your dominant player, your primary scorer, and he's like way better than all your other players, and he kind of carries your team, he puts up 20 a game and whatever, then like, dude, that guy's pulling heat checks the whole game, like, that's just the shots he's taking, like, so. And if he is that great of a shooter, like, if then they have to take tough ones, because you're being face guarded, you're not you've got a great defender on you, the whole other team is keying on you, so like, even half of your shots, I guess they might not technically be heat checks, but they are tough shots. So you can accept like your best player, if his role is to do that and shoot 20 shots a game, then you can accept tough shots, I think, from him.
And that's going to tie into kind of my next thing here, is that when it comes to like shot selection, I think who is shooting does matter. Like, I don't want to make it seem like you have a completely different set of rules, but like, I was extremely fortunate to have, really, like, one of the best shooters in the state of California last year. And that's not something I say lightly. You got to see her play, I think, once or twice, but she hit 111 threes, I think, in the season last year, and ended up being number 1 in the entire section for threes made, and like number 7 in the state of California for threes made. And she shot it at like 38%, so she had multiple games of hitting 7 threes, 6, 7, 8 threes. And the shots she took were sometimes contested, and like, sometimes they were not as great as, the shots that everyone else took. But I knew if one went in, like, she might roll off four threes in a minute and a half or 2 minutes. Like, seriously, she could get that hot. And so when you have that type of a player, 1, it's a luxury, but 2, you might have to, like, you bend the rules. You don't change your philosophy, but you might bend it just a little bit, because you still want them taking good shots. But at the end of the day, you realize, like, they're special, like, they can do something that the other players can't, and you don't want to put too much of a rein on them. Otherwise, I think you limit what they can do, Even with her, when she first played for me, she was pulling some crazy shots, and I had to be like, okay, like, we got to dial it down, like, yeah, I want you shooting. Yes, I want you taking 10 threes a game, like, I'm okay with that. But I want you to get like 8 or 9 like great ones, and I'm okay with like 1 okay one, not 7 okay ones and 1 or 2 great ones. Like, that's not a good balance for us. So, and she learned how to do that, which is why she ended up hitting 111 threes her senior year.
That made me think of something too, is like, as a shooter, like, it's important that you get your first shot is like a good look. Like, the last thing you want to do is have your first 3 shots you take be like super tough ones that have a low percentage of going in. because it messes with your head. You're supposed, shoot or shoot, keep shooting. But come on, let's be real. Like in a game, when you miss four to start the game, like you're probably not going to have a great shooting game. It does mess with your confidence a little bit. So, you get those first two are just wide open, drive and kick threes, or it's just like a shooting drill, and you make both of them. Like, yeah, you're going to have a good game. You're going to like the next couple shots, you might be off balance and might just hit them. So I think that is important, that your first few looks are good. And another thing I wanted to mention too is like I'm talking about, getting wide open ones. That'd be great if every shot we were able to get. Like that's what we're trying to get, but we're not going to get that every time. I mean, number one, there's a shot clock. So, I've had teams that were like super disciplined in getting good shots, and we did have like shot clock violations like crazy that year. Like it seemed like some games, like against good defensive teams, it was like, dang, dude, we're having to get into a ball screen at the end of every possession because it was like 5, 4, 3 every time. So yeah, you do have to take shots that are not wide open 9s and 8s and 7s. So I think maybe that's the difference too. Like, okay, so there's the competition in shot selection in the game within the game, right? Who can run offense and generate more wide open shots. Okay, that's level 1. This team, let's say that's equal. Well, what's level 2? Who can make tough shots? It's like who out of those two teams now, if all things are equal in the getting wide open ones, who's better at making the tough ones? And then, so yeah, you do have to shoot those tough ones sometimes, and your best shooter hopefully is the one shooting those.
I think that's a good way to break it down, is there's levels to it, right? It's not just one thing. There's a lot of levels, and you only talked about a couple of them, but all of that put together is what ends up kind of, I don't want to say dictating, but definitely guiding towards who's going to probably have a better chance of winning a game, right? I know a drill, and I don't know if you have any, I'm sure you do something like this, or maybe if you have any that you want to kind of talk about, but there's a drill that we adopted kind of recently. I can't remember where I saw it, but I saw this drill and I was like, oh, that's actually a really good drill for multiple levels of decision making. But it basically starts with a guard in the slot and a guard on the wing, or just two players, one on the slot, one on the wing, and then you have a help defender that's just sitting there waiting. And then you have on the opposite wing, in the opposite corner, 2 shooters. So it's basically 3-on-2, but what happens is the guard in the slot dribbles at, you put a coach like right near the wing as well. They dribble at and they do a handoff with that other guard on the wing that's on the same side as them. And as soon as they hand it off, that player becomes offense and the player that handed it off becomes defense. And they have to like wrap around the coach and try and meet him on the other side, right? So now it's like 1-on-1 there, and then you have your help defender with 2 guards that they can, they're going to have to pick up. And so the guard with the ball has to make a decision. Like if they can get to the rim, they rack it, right? That's usually rare because you got help defense and a guard there. But if not, then, they got to jump stop in the lane and then kick. And then that help side has to make a quick decision. Are they going to fly out? What are they going to do? Are they going to close short and try and shoot the gap on the pass? And it makes the 2 shooters decide, like, am I wide open to shoot this, or do I need to give this up to the corner for a better shot, right? And so we've been implementing that. It's something I'm planning on doing, quite a bit this year, and I'm interested to see if it'll help with our decision making and continue to build on those instincts, because I think that's the hardest thing, is it's hard to drill some of these decision making things. I feel like a lot of it just comes from playing, but I think you can drill it and you can teach it. It's just, you have to be kind of specific in what you're doing.
Yeah, no, that sounds like a great drill. I think we do something similar to that. We're talking about small-sided games, right? Where you give the offense an advantage, and that drill that you outlined right there sounds like a great, almost like a driving a triple gap, right? And is that kind of what it is, and you're making that decision?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I guess, let's see, I'd have to think about it, if that's really a triple gap, because when you're coming off that handoff, like the defender's right there. So I wouldn't say it's quite driving a triple gap, but it's just like you made a drive, you were able to kind of maybe get a paint touch, defense collapsed, and you got shooters, on the wings that you can kick out to.
Yeah, no, that sounds like a great drill. I'll have to diagram that up after this and try it out, because I love those kind of drills. And those kind of drills do drill the decision making, I feel like, because like it's all about throwing the one mores, like that's like an advantage drill, right? You're getting the advantage, you're making the pass, throwing a one more to keep the advantage, just kind of like I was talking about earlier. And a drill that we do that's kind of similar to that is like 2-on-1 shooting, where you got one defender under the basket. First of all, you make 2 teams, so you got one team under the basket, you got the other team like on a 2 side, like a corner and wing. And then the coach drives it and then kicks it opposite to the corner or the wing, and then it's just 2-on-1 trying to get a shot. And kind of the rules that we put in are, you're allowed to drive it 1 time, so you can drive in and get a layup, or you're allowed to pass it 2 times. So you can drive it one time, pass it 2 times. So essentially what we call it is like a one more. So if you throw it to the corner and the defense close out, you throw a one more and that guy can shoot it or he can drive it. And if he drives it, a lot of times the defense will go with him and kind of contest the layup so he can kick it right back to the corner and they can shoot a wide open 3. But essentially you should get a wide open shot because you can drive it or you can pass it. And then another thing we teach too besides the one more is like a lot of times when a player's stuck guarding 2, right? So the ball swings around, you got 2 guys, you kind of like play in between, right? You kind of bluff in between. So we call it a bam bam where you get it on the wing. If he's playing in between, you throw that pass, and then if he closes out, then you throw it right back. So we call that a bam bam. So you're either throwing a one more, a bam bam, or driving it and then throwing a kickback. So that's a good drill that we do pretty often. That seems like the players like it. And I think it does help drill the decision making.
Yeah, I like that. You have a lot of terminology. I feel like whenever we talk, I'm picking up stuff sometimes that I'm like, these are things that I talk about, but I'm not as distinct with my specific terminology, you know? And that's something that I probably want to get better at, is having that there for the kids to be able to pick up on.
Yeah, and a lot of it I just took from people, you know, like Bam Bam's Chris Oliver, or I don't know. I mean, everyone calls it a one more, but yeah, it's all stuff that I pick up and sometimes modify. But this year, recently, I've put together like a glossary of like every kind of cut we have, every kind of action, and, you know, just every kind of finish. So those kind of things. And I'm excited to give it to the players, but you know, it's one of those things where they'll look at it one time and then forget. So.
Yeah, it's like the teacher that creates like the perfect lesson plan and gives it to the kids, and they look at it once and throw it away, and the teacher just spent like 12 hours working on it.
Exactly.
Like,
hopefully for the coaches to like try to, you know, get the terminology dialed in throughout. I mean, our terminology is changing all the time, but yeah, it's fun to like steal terminology from other people or even come up with some. Maybe taking a play from somebody, maybe modified it a little bit or whatever, but like you want to come up with a name for it that maybe is different than what they had called it or whatever. And dude, sometimes it's hard. Sometimes it's hard to come up with a name for that kind of stuff, or come up for a name for a drill or something. I'll be like we just added a terminology for handoffs, dribble handoffs. We're calling them thunders now. So, and I was like thinking for a day about that. I was like trying to come up with something. I was like, okay, handoffs are thunders. I don't know.
There you go. Yeah. Got to get creative in coaching sometimes. So I know we're almost done here with the episode, but one thing I also wanted to talk about that I think is super important with helping with shot selection is film study. I think film is a really great way to help players understand like good decision making, because they can see it, you know, they can see themselves from a different perspective. You can slow it down, you can really analyze like what was being done, and they can talk themselves through it and you can talk them through it. So I think film is really underrated for that. We usually look, you know, I think a lot of times people think of film as like just scouting other teams, but I think watching film on yourself is super valuable as well for a lot of reasons, but shot selection being one of them.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's something that I kind of have a goal of improving this year, because I am one of those guys that uses a lot of my film time just doing scouting stuff. So I definitely want to learn more about how to watch film as a team and stuff. I mean, we do watch pretty much every game that we play in, but I just don't know how good I am at spotting that kind of stuff. But I guess, yeah, like you can definitely see like the difference between a wide open shot and a contested shot. I don't know. Like for me, I guess maybe the reason that I am not good at watching our own film so much is because as a player, I used to hate it, man. I used, you know, going into that film session, like you just feel like you're going to get called out for everything. So yeah, we had a couple kind of tough film sessions last year where you got to call some guys out, but it did help. It did help. So, you know, I will give it credit.
Yeah. And I think the other thing too, especially in high school, is we just don't have the time. Like, I feel like we have games so often and like, okay, I might be able to do film, but like, if you really wanted to watch every game, like you're watching film every day then, because you're going to watch film a day or two ahead of the next game you're playing, and you might only have like 2 days between the gaps, you know, so you don't have time to watch on yourself from the previous game. And if you have a longer period of time, let's say you have 4 or 5 days between the games, then you're going to watch 1 or 2 days of your own film, and then you're going to watch the next 2 days of another team's film. And I think, especially in high school, like that can drag. You know, it can get old fast, and it can be something that the kids don't get as much out of it because, like you said, they start to dread it. What I've found is when we watch film on other teams, that's always good, and we find ways to do that. Sometimes we'll watch on our own, but what I've done is, and I'm sure you can do this, or you do this as well, is like they have access to Huddle, so I'll just be like, hey, film's up. And so the kids, really, a lot of them got into watching it on their own. And yeah, it's not as good as if I was there with them, but they do see stuff, and they would come to me sometimes and be like, hey, yeah, last game I noticed this, and I was like, oh, you're like really studying the game. You're not just, watching it just to watch it. Like, you're actually paying attention to what you're doing. So that's kind of cool, is maybe the kids start self-monitoring, and that's it's a step of growth.
Yeah, and I think that's cool too, because like if you do a good job as a coach, kind of like I said, bringing that clarity of like what you want, what you're looking to do, like the kids understand it, and like when they watch the film, they'll critique themselves and other players too, and they'll realize kind of what they're doing wrong, and then be able to like adjust. Hopefully, I mean, it's hard as a player to like be like, oh, okay, well I need to be taking these kind of shots, and then like go into a game and be like, it's going to happen, like right away. Like I feel like there's so many instincts and like habits that need to be built through practice that it takes a little bit more time. But yeah, I think the shot selection stuff in film is huge, because you can see it clear as day, and it's, if you have your whole team there watching it together, like it's a little bit, like I said, a little awkward and stuff. And I don't know, it can make someone seem a little selfish, I guess, if they're taking bad shots.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Well, I think we've hit a lot of different parts here on shot selection. So hopefully if you're watching, you got something from this episode that'll help you out. As we said, shot selection is, if not the most important, then definitely one of the most important things. I think most coaches would agree on that, because at the end of the day, the goal is to score the ball. And so if you don't take good shots, you're probably going to have a tougher time doing that. So, just try and build your shot selection with your team, or if you're an individual player, think about that when you're playing. Get the best shot as much as possible, and you give yourselves a higher chance of winning your game. So with that being said, thank you guys so much for watching. We appreciate you following along with us. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, you can follow us there. If you're listening or watching here on YouTube, you can please subscribe. And other than that, thank you again, and we'll see you in the next video.